When a pharmaceutical product receives regulatory approval, it may seem like the journey is complete, but in reality, approval is not the finish line. It's the beginning of a new phase in the product life cycle. Even after approval, changes are often necessary. Manufacturing processes evolve, equipment gets upgraded, suppliers change, and companies look for ways to improve efficiency. But in pharmaceuticals, even a small change can potentially impact product quality, safety, or efficacy. That's why regulatory systems exist to carefully manage these changes. In the United States, this framework is known as SUPAC, Scale Up and Post Approval Changes, guided by the US Food and Drug Administration. In Europe and many other regions, these changes are handled through what are called variations. At the core of both systems is a simple idea: not all changes carry the same level of risk. Some changes are minor and have minimal impact, while others are major and require thorough regulatory review. Understanding this distinction is essential. Let's begin with minor changes. Minor changes are those that are unlikely to affect the product's quality, safety, or performance. These are low risk modifications and are often related to routine improvements or administrative updates. For example, a company might change the supplier of a non critical raw material, adjust manufacturing parameters within an approved range, or update documentation without altering the actual process. Because the risk is low, regulatory authorities allow more flexibility here. These changes often follow a do and tell or tell and do approach. In simple terms, the company can either implement the change and inform the authority afterward or notify them before implementation with minimal supporting data. In the European system, these are typically categorized as type IA or type IB variations. Now let's move to major changes. Major changes are a completely different story. These are changes that could significantly impact the product's quality, safety, or efficacy, and therefore must be carefully evaluated before implementation. Examples include changes in formulation, switching manufacturing sites, modifying the sterilization process, or significantly scaling up production. Because these changes carry higher risk, they require prior approval from regulatory authorities. In the US, this is often handled through a prior approval supplement, while in Europe, these are classified as type 2 variations. For such changes, companies must submit detailed scientific data, including validation reports, stability studies, and sometimes even bioequivalence or clinical data to demonstrate that the product remains unchanged in terms of performance. Now, the question is, how do companies decide whether a change is minor or major? This is where change control logic comes into play. Change control is a structured internal system used by pharmaceutical companies to evaluate any proposed change before it is implemented. It is a critical part of the quality management system and ensures that every change is scientifically justified and properly documented. The process begins with identifying the change. What exactly is being modified? Is it a raw material, a process parameter, equipment, or a manufacturing site? Next comes the most important step: risk assessment. Companies evaluate the potential impact of the change on critical quality attributes, often called CQAs. These include properties like potency, purity, dissolution, and stability. They also assess whether the change could affect the manufacturing process, control strategy, or ultimately patient safety. Based on this evaluation, the change is classified into different categories: minor, moderate, or major, depending on the level of risk involved. Once classified, the regulatory pathway is determined. Low risk changes may only require internal documentation or simple notification. Moderate changes may require additional data and regulatory review. High risk changes demand full regulatory approval before implementation. But classification alone is not enough. Companies must also demonstrate comparability. This means proving that the product before and after the change is essentially the same in terms of quality and performance. To do this, they conduct studies such as analytical testing, dissolution profile comparisons, stability studies, and in some cases, bioequivalence studies. The goal is clear: even if the process changes, the patient should receive the same safe and effective medicine. Modern pharmaceutical development supports this approach through quality by design or QBD. When a process is well understood and controlled within defined limits, companies can implement certain changes with greater confidence and sometimes with reduced regulatory burden. Post-approval changes are an inevitable and essential part of the pharmaceutical life cycle.
Subscribe to MedPharma Global on YouTube. Get the latest medical and pharmaceutical updates. Click the subscribe button and join our community.